Forbidden Archive Entry 1. The Structure of the Imperium. Archive designation sealed. Continuity reference established. Record begins. I am Archivist and Custodian of Sanctioned Memory Fragments, charged with preservation. These words are compiled from distributed records, fragmentary data vaults, and inherited catalogues maintained across successive custodial lineages. They are presented without judgment. They are preserved without alteration. They exist so that continuity may endure. Tonight's entry concerns the structure of the Imperium of Man, its functional reality as recorded across administrative and logistical strata. To comprehend the Imperium, one must abandon the notion of scale familiar to singular worlds. There is no nation, no federation. It is a civilization diffused across the galactic breadth, composed of over 1 million inhabited systems whose precise enumeration is neither stable nor consistently verifiable. The Imperium does not exist as a coherent whole, perceived simultaneously by its constituents. It exists as accumulation, a distributed persistence maintained by tradition, obligation, and survival necessity. No central authority maintains complete awareness of its own extent. Records degrade, transit fails. Astropathic communication distorts. Worlds vanish beyond storms or invasion. Others are rediscovered generations later and catalogued anew. Thus, the Imperium is not static territory. It is a shifting continuity of holdings bound together by allegiance and function. Governance is formally unified beneath the eternal sovereign authority enthroned upon terror. This authority is absolute in doctrine. In practice, however, operational governance is necessarily devolved, granted substantial autonomy. Such autonomy is conditional upon fulfillment of 2 obligations. First, loyalty to the Imperium's continuity. Second, Tith contribution proportionate to assigned classification. The Tith system forms the primary connective structure between worlds and greater administration. It is the mechanism through which resources flow, militaries are sustained, and strategic operations remain viable. Tiths manifest in varied form. Agrarian worlds export sustenance. Mining colonies yield raw material. Industrial hive planets manufacture armament and infrastructure. Populous territories supply manpower for deployment across theatres of conflict. Assessment of Tith expectation is conducted through vast administrative apparatus whose scope exceeds comprehensive description. Adepts of record dedicate entire lifespans to quantification, recalculation, and certification of compliance. Failure to meet Tith obligation initiates review. Review initiates scrutiny. Scrutiny may result in sanction, replacement of governance, or military correction. These processes are procedural rather than emotional. They ensure systemic stability. Administrative continuity is maintained through documentation on a scale that defines entire planetary economies. Archive populations spend generational existence transcribing, duplicating, indexing, and preserving data streams whose origins predate their lineage. Information movement is deliberate rather than rapid. Authorization requests may traverse decades. Policy amendments may outlive their authors. Orders sometimes arrive after circumstances have rendered them irrelevant. This inefficiency is acknowledged within records. It is also accepted. The Imperium's endurance derives not from procedural elegance, but from mass and inertia. It persists because accumulated structure resists collapse. Technological continuity within the Imperium reflects historical regression from prior eras of comprehension. Surviving machinery frequently originates from epochs where understanding exceeded present interpretive capability. Operational practice emphasizes replication over innovation. Deviation risks destabilization of function. Standardized ritual accompanies activation and maintenance procedures. These rituals serve dual purposes: procedural consistency and cultural reinforcement of machine reverence. Technological artifacts are preserved through tradition when theoretical explanation has been lost. This approach ensures reliability across centuries, though advancement proceeds incrementally. The lived experience of Imperial citizens varies according to planetary classification, yet demonstrates consistent themes of labour obligation and structural integration. Many populations inhabit hive cities, ecological megastructures housing billions within vertically stratified environments. Lives unfold within industrial sectors without exposure to planetary surface conditions. Others reside on frontier territories where environmental hardship defines survival. Agri-world populations labour across planetary scales cultivation stones, sustaining distant systems they will never witness. Across classifications, individual identity commonly aligns with function. Contribution to systemic continuation is regarded as primary purpose. Military presence permeates Imperial structure. Conflict is not episodic but constant. Engagement occurs across external and internal vectors simultaneously. External threats arise from non-human civilizations, expansionist entities, and phenomena not conforming to conventional categorization. Internal threats include rebellion, deviation, and ideological fragmentation capable of destabilizing cohesion. Consequently, armed forces exist. Recruitment, deployment, and attrition operate as continuous cycles rather than exceptional events. War is not an anomaly within the Imperium. Interstellar travel and communication rely upon interaction with a parallel dimension, enabling faster-than-light traversal and message projection. Navigation through this medium involves variables beyond material predictability. Transit irregularities are documented. Temporal displacement occurrences are recorded. Loss events remain statistically significant. Despite hazard, dependence upon this medium persists due to absence of viable alternatives. Thus, connectivity across galactic distance is maintained through managed risk. Cultural cohesion within the Imperium derives less from shared experiences and more from shared doctrine. Faith structures unify populations separated by light years of distance and centuries of developmental divergence. Ritual observance reinforces belonging to something greater than planetary origin. Symbolic allegiance ensures recognition of collective identity. This cohesion compensates for fragmentation inherent in galactic dispersion. From an archival perspective, the Imperium's defining characteristic is neither brutality nor sanctity. It is persistence. It continues because innumerable systems perform assigned function regardless of inefficiency, hardship, or loss. No singular failure results in systemic cessation. Replacement occurs. Reallocation proceeds. Records are updated. Continuity always resumes. This concludes the foundational overview required for subsequent archive entries. Further records will examine constituent structures and figures whose influence shaped present configuration. Preservation of knowledge remains the objective. Interpretation remains external to the archive mandate. Record ends. Continuity maintained. Forbidden Archive Entry 2. The Emperor. Archive designation sealed. Continuity reference verified. Record begins. This entry concerns being designated within the Imperial record as the Emperor of Mankind. Preservation of data regarding this subject presents unusual challenges. Documentation spans mythic narrative, military logs, theological doctrine, and fragmentary eyewitness accounts. distinguishing categorical boundaries between them is not always possible. Therefore, this record does not assert singular interpretation. It preserves available continuity. The Emperor's origin is not defined by unified archival agreement. Earliest references suggest existence predating recorded civilization on Terra, though such claims derive from reconstructed testimonies rather than verifiable contemporaneous documentation. What can be catalogued with relative confidence is that prior to humanity's expansion beyond its cradle world, a singular individual emerged as an architect of planetary unification. This emergence coincided with the terminal phase of conflict known within surviving records as the Unification Wars. During this era, Terra existed in fragmented techno-barbaric states, ruled by competing warlords and augmented regimes wielding relic technologies of considerable destructive capability. The Emperor's campaigns concluded this fragmentation through systemic conquest, alliance, and technological superiority. Accounts describe leadership capacity exceeding conventional strategic modeling. Military successes occurred under conditions where predictive outcome favored opposition. Command presence alone influenced morale stabilization and coordination across disparate forces. It is during this phase that the Emperor's nature begins transitioning from historical actor into symbolic construct. Descriptions of his abilities extend beyond physical or intellectual exceptionalism. Witness records attribute psychic capacity operating at magnitudes rare even within humanity's most gifted individuals. Such capacity included perception beyond conventional sensory range, projection of will across distance, and interaction with immaterial dimensions underpinning interstellar travel. Terminology describing these capabilities varies across archives. Some designate them as biological anomalies, others categorize them as evolutionary apex expressions. Theological records define them as divine manifestation. Archive function does not arbitrate between them. Following unification of Terra, the Emperor initiated expansion beyond the home system. This undertaking, later designated the Great Crusade, aimed to reconnect scattered human colonies isolated during prior ages of technological collapse and galactic turmoil. To achieve this objective, the Emperor oversaw creation of transhuman military cadres engineered by expeditionary warfare. Concurrently, he established administrative frameworks enabling governance of recovered worlds. During this expansion phase, Imperial doctrine portrayed the Emperor not as deity, but as rational sovereign advocating secular unity. Surviving documentation repeatedly emphasizes discouragement of worship practices directed toward his person. This doctrinal stance demonstrates divergence between early imperial philosophy and later religious orthodoxy. Expansion succeeded in reconnecting vast numbers of human systems. Cultural integration occurred unevenly. Compliance ranged from voluntary allegiance to enforced assimilation. Regardless of method, imperial presence proliferated. Central to this era's continuity was the Emperor's direct mobility and strategic oversight. His presence anchored coordination across immense theatre scope. This condition altered following catastrophic civil conflict, now designated within archival continuity as the Horus Heresy. Detailed preservation of that conflict remains reserved for future entries. For present purposes, outcome significance is primary. Conflict culminated in the Emperor sustaining mortal-scale physical trauma during terminal confrontation aboard a flagship vessel. Subsequent preservation procedures resulted in his interment within arcane life-sustaining infrastructure upon Terra. Since that juncture, the Emperor has remained physically immobile, yet functionally central to Imperial survival. The nature of his continued existence constitutes intersection of engineering, psychic projection, and doctrinal belief. Physiological independence is absent. Nevertheless, measurable phenomena attributed to his presence persist. Primary among these is stabilization of the Astronomicon, a psychic beacon projected through immaterial space, enabling navigation across interstellar distance. Without this signal, coordinated travel between stars would degrade severely. Thus, irrespective of interpretation regarding consciousness or divinity, operational reliance upon his continued existence remains absolute. Over millennia, public perception of the emperor transformed. The origin secular sovereign became a divine figurehead within expanding state religion. Worship structures now permeate imperial culture. Iconography, liturgy, and devotion reinforce unity across otherwise disconnected populations. This transformation reflects sociological adaptation rather than singular degree. Faith provided cohesion where distance prevented shared experience. The emperor's image became the focal point for identity and endurance. Archival neutrality records this evolution without endorsement or rejection. Assessment of the emperor's nature, therefore, resolves into layered observation. Historically, he functioned as unifier, strategist, and architect of expansion. Biologically and psychically, records suggest capabilities exceeding known human limits. Symbolically, he operates as a central myth binding civilization across astronomical scales. Functionally, he remains an infrastructural necessity, enabling navigation and coordination. These layers coexist. They are not mutually exclusive. Within sealed archives exist fragments proposing alternative interpretations regarding intention, foresight, or long-term design beyond immediate comprehension. Such fragments remain incomplete and lack sufficient corroboration for structured inclusion within primary record. They are preserved. They are not expanded upon. The emperor's reality cannot be reduced to singular descriptor. He is simultaneously historical individual, sustaining mechanism, and axis of collective belief. Whether observer categorizes this convergence as tragedy, transcendence, or inevitability lies beyond archival scope. Continuity alone is documented. So long as the Astronomicon burns and terror remains seat of governance, the emperor's presence endures as foundational constant within imperial structure. Record approaches closure. Subsequent entries may address engineered warriors created under his direction, or the immaterial dimension through which his beacon projects. Both subjects intersect with this continuity. Preservation objective fulfilled. Record ends. Continuity maintained. Forbidden Archive Entry 3. The creation of the Space Marines. Archive designation sealed. Continuity reference confirmed. Record begins. This entry concerns the transhuman military orders formerly designated the Adeptus Astartes, commonly referred to as the Space Marines. They are not baseline human soldiers. They are not merely augmented infantry. They are purpose-built instruments engineered for strategic dominance in environments where conventional forces prove insufficient. Understanding their creation requires examination of both biological reconstruction and psychological architecture. The origin of the Space Marines lies within the Emperor's expansion era, during which rapid galactic reclamation demanded forces capable of independent operation across hostile worlds. Standard human militaries could conquer. They could not reliably endure sustained multi-system campaigns against adversaries possessing superior physiology, unconventional biology, or extreme environmental adaptation. Thus, a new template was required. Candidate selection begins in early adolescence. Age range varies by chapter and recruitment world, but prematurity is consistent requirement. At this stage, biological plasticity allows for integration of gene seed organs derived from preserved genetic matrices originally engineered under the Emperor's direction. The transformation is not singular procedure, it is sequential reconstruction. Implantation of secondary heart increases circulatory redundancy. Reinforced skeletal growth alters structural resilience. Augmented musculature multiplies baseline strength. Modified hemastamin enhances oxygen processing. Catalespian node reduces need for conventional sleep cycles. Preomnor and multi-lung enable survival in toxic atmospheres. Neuroglottis permits chemical analysis through ingestion. Black carapace interfaces with power armor systems through neural linkage. Each organ integrates gradually. Rejection rate remains statistically significant. Mortality during transformation is accepted operational loss. Those who survive emerge physically distinct from humanity's norm. Height increases markedly. Musculature density exceeds natural range. Reaction time accelerates. Wound tolerance expands beyond civilian survivability thresholds. However, biological alteration alone does not define a space marine. Psychological conditioning proceeds concurrently. Recruits undergo hypno-indoctrination, accelerated cognitive programming embedding doctrine, tactical knowledge, loyalty frameworks, and reflexive obedience. Memory implantation supplements experiential deficit, granting operational familiarity with weapon systems and battlefield variables before first deployment. Emotional architecture is deliberately modified. Fear response attenuated. Self-preservation instinct subordinated to mission objective. Pain interpretation recontextualized as data rather than deterrent. Individual identity is not erased but reconstructed. A recruit ceases to conceptualize self as autonomous life form and instead internalizes identity as component of chapter lineage and Imperial continuity. The psychological reorientation ensures reliability under circumstances that would destabilize unmodified human cognition. It must be noted that psychological stability among Space Marines does not equate to emotional absence. They experience loyalty, honor, and fraternal attachment with intensity surpassing baseline human averages. Brotherhood within a chapter operates as primary relational structure. Bonds between battle brothers substitute for familial ties relinquished during initiation. Yet these attachments function within constrained hierarchy. Obedience to chapter command supersedes personal sentiment. Strategic calculus overrides preference. Operational doctrine emphasizes rapid strike warfare, shock deployment, and decapitation of enemy command structures. Small numbers achieve disproportionate effect through mobility, armor integration, and discipline coordination. A Space Marine does not wage war as attritional infantry. He executes precise annihilation of critical targets. This combat paradigm influences long-term psychology. Extended lifespan further differentiates them from humanity at large. With proper maintenance and survival in battle, Space Marines may serve for centuries. Memory accumulation across campaigns produces perspective inaccessible to mortal populations with limited temporal experience. This longevity contributes to detachment. They observe planetary generations rise and fall. They witness administrative cycles repeat. They endure while baseline humanity ages and perishes. Consequently, identification with individual civilian population diminishes. Loyalty focuses on Imperium as abstraction rather than localized community. Despite engineered resilience, psychological fracture remains possible. Trauma, ideological divergence, or exposure to destabilizing phenomena may produce deviation. Historical precedent confirms catastrophic consequences when such deviation occurs at transhuman scale. Therefore, chapters maintain internal structures of discipline, ritual, and spiritual reinforcement. Chaplains oversee doctrinal purity. Librarians monitor psychic capacity among those capable of immaterial perception. Apothecaries preserve gene seed integrity and biological continuity. Gene seed itself requires consideration. Each chapter traces lineage to one of the original Primarch genetic lines engineered during the Emperor's expansion era. These genetic templates shape both physiological tendencies and behavioral predispositions. Some lineages exhibit heightened aggression, others display contemplative restraint. Variations influence chapter culture, combat doctrine, and interpersonal conduct. Over millennia, mutation or degradation within gene seed stocks has occurred. Chapters vigilantly test and tith gene seed samples to centralize authorities to present cumulative corruption. The Space Marine, therefore, exists at intersection of biology, ideology, and inheritance. He is not citizen elevated to warrior. He is reconstructed into strategic asset whose humanity persists but no longer governs. From civilian perspective, Space Marines often appear distant or mythic. Armor obscures expression. Communication remains concise and utilitarian. Interaction with populations they defend may be brief and devoid of visible empathy. This perception reinforces their symbolic function. They embody the Imperium's will, not its tenderness. Yet internal chapter records reveal nuanced interiority. They reflect upon honor, failure, legacy, and sacrifice. They maintain remembrance of fallen brethren through ritual and inscription. They compose battle histories and preserve relics as continuity markers. Psychologically, they reconcile two identities. They are human in origin. They are weapon in function. Balance between these states defines stability. When equilibrium holds, a Space Marine operates as disciplined guardian capable of extraordinary sacrifice without hesitation. When equilibrium fractures, consequences amplify proportionate to their capability. Thus, the Imperium invests significant resource into maintaining chapter integrity. Although numerically scarce relative to planetary populations, Space Marines serve as force multipliers whose presence can alter campaign trajectory decisively. It is statistically inaccurate to characterize them as primary defenders of every world. Their numbers do not permit ubiquity. Instead, they intervene at critical junctures where conventional forces approach operational limits. Their rarity enhances psychological impact upon allies and adversaries alike. To summarize without reduction, the creation of a Space Marine is deliberate dismantling and reconstruction of human potential into optimized combat organism. The psychology of a Space Marine is structured alignment of identity with perpetual warfare and collective continuity. They are neither emotionless automata nor unmodified men. They are transitional beings situated between humanity and something engineered for survival within a hostile galaxy. Preservation of this understanding clarifies their role within Imperial structure. They are not the Imperium's mass, they are its edge. Record approaches termination. Subsequent entries may examine the immaterial dimension through which they travel, or the civil war that tested their loyalty at civilization's most fragile hour. Archive integrity maintained. Record ends. Continuity preserved.